Many believe this to be the best Galaxy smartphone that Samsung ever produced. It has a big, bright, sharp display, a pretty impressive camera for the time that could shoot 4K 30p footage, metal rails with a solid feeling in the hand, and decent performance and battery life, but it also had the S Pen, a removable back with replaceable battery, upgradable storage, and of course the now coveted headphone port. Believe it or not, it's been a decade since the Galaxy Note 4 came out, and today I want to celebrate the 10th birthday, one of the coolest phones ever made. But before that guys, I am desperate to hit 100,000 subscribers. I've been doing this thing for 10 years, so if you could hit that sub button, genuinely it would make the difference and mean the absolute world to me. Thank you. The Galaxy Note name hasn't been with us for a number of years now, as the company decided to release the phone under a new Galaxy S Ultra moniker. But this phone is the quintessential Note. It was big, it was bold, it was expensive by 2014 standards, and it packed in all the features of a high-end phone. What threw me off is when I picked this up, I thought, this doesn't feel that big. And then I put it next to its modern equivalent, the S24 Ultra, and it's really a lot closer than I thought it was. And it all has to do with the way that it wears its size. It's 25% lighter, a hair shorter, and though it's only 0.1mm thinner at its thickest point because the back is tapered with thinner side rails, it feels markedly more slender and easy to hold on to. This is the perfect example of what I've been saying for ages. Flat dimensions on a phone make no sense. They look cool in photos, but the reason we initially moved away from them, with the likes of the iPhone 5S, is because of their poor ergonomic qualities when you scale a phone up to something that's this big. The Note 4 feels fantastic in the hand. The pleather back is obviously less prone to cracking than the glass equivalent these days. The metal rails still feel cold in the morning. They have that premium feeling. The buttons still feel super tactile and clicky even 10 years down the road. And whoever I bought this model from has definitely kept it in remarkable condition. And look, a headphone port. How novel. What a wild world we live in these days. Because of course one of the big reasons many of us hold on to this phone so dearly is that it was the last Note to have a removable back, unlocking access to the SIM tray, the microSD card slot, and of course that 3220 mAh battery. Who needs fast charging when you just carry a spare battery around with you and instantly swap it out for 100% charge in 5 seconds? It really does feel strange pulling the back off a phone in 2024, but it's also refreshing to do so. Here's one for you. Most people on Earth are right-handed. There are a lot of lefties out there, but most people are right-handed. So to use the S Pen, they would hold their phone in their left hand and scribble away with their dominant hand. So why on earth did they move the stylus slot from the correct side to the left side? It's probably so that they could fit the bigger cameras in, as they were also on that side on the more modern smartphones. But I remember them moving the S Pen for the first time and thinking, why on earth would you do that? Because it's just harder to access on that left side if you're right-handed. If you're a lefty, doesn't matter to you though. The Note 4's version isn't nearly as powerful as what you'll find in 2024's phone, but it's still really responsive. It feels great in the hand and does exactly what the S Pen is really meant to do. Anyway, one of the other big things you might notice, and let's be honest, it's hard to miss it, is the 5.7-inch Quad HD AMOLED display. Nope, that's not a typo in my script. This is a 5.7-inch corner-to-corner display, and next to this 6.8-inch panel on the S24 Ultra, thanks to not only the big chin and forehead that we were all so used to at this point with capacitive off-screen buttons and front-facing branding, remember that? But also the fact that this was still a time where phones rocked the 9:16 aspect ratio, making the Note 4's panel today look pretty fat. But I must say, despite it looking pretty outdated at this point, I do love a proper square corner on the display. It still looks very impressive in 2024, as it probably should. It's a Samsung panel, guys. They do it the best. However, its obvious limitations are in that it runs 60Hz, which is kind of sad. Something that wouldn't be rectified actually until the Note 20, and still is pretty bright. It doesn't reach those crazy heights that modern smartphones have been able to do. In the past couple of years, we've seen phone makers really push brightness on smartphones, and that is the other telltale sign that this is an older display. The cameras, and yes, I can still technically say cameras because there's one on the front and one on the back, were renowned for being up there with the best at the time. The rear camera really isn't that bad in 2024, like it's half the size of what we're used to, and it's 16 megapixels, probably a bit too low res to be considered a good selfie camera these days. But actually, when you look at the samples, I actually think they look better than I thought they would. Now, this is the era of Samsung's cameras where they really wanted to push the processing, push the sharpness, push the saturation all the way up to 11 every single time. And at a glance, it's not all that noticeable, but it's mostly when you pinch in or look at details that you can really see where all that processing is going on. This sensor isn't as capable as a modern sensor, so really there needs to be more processing if anything. The Ultra HD 4K 30p video is maybe the area that shows the most weakness on the Galaxy Note 4. Despite having optical image stabilization, the camera doesn't smooth out walking and movement as much as the hybrid setups we have in our phones these days, and the dynamic range takes a big hit too, probably due to a combination of the tiny sensor and limited processing power. And that carries over to the storage and battery that I want to quickly touch on because of course they're both removable. This phone by default came with 32GB of onboard storage, but since that's not going to be enough in 2024, you can just pop in a microSD card, no dramas. You can upgrade it right there and then. And since the original battery is likely to be just completely dead at this point, that's a quick, cheap swap too. No need to risk damaging it by pulling the whole phone apart yourself, just do it the Galaxy Note 4 way. But perhaps the most notoriously bad thing about the Galaxy Note 4, about smartphones from Samsung in general at this time,
was TouchWiz.
And I might do a video about how TouchWiz was like the biggest turnaround in smartphone history, because Samsung's skin moving to One UI was ginormous. TouchWiz did not have a good reputation. The Note 4 runs Android 6 Marshmallow, a setup that's clearly way out of date at this point, so good luck finding modern apps and games that seamlessly work with it. But you'll notice darting around the OS that the phone isn't the snappiest, and that's, I guess, to be expected. It is 10 years old, but it's not necessarily down to the underpowered Exynos 5433 processor I have in my European version of the Note 4, nor is it the 3 gigs of RAM, but actually the software skin atop Android here is really heavy and bloated, which combined with those, I guess, suboptimal performance specifications really bogs it down. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about that these days, with One UI being probably one of the best modern smartphone skins. And modern smartphone tech and performance is so overkill right now, with like 12 gigs of RAM, it's likely not ever going to be this slow again. But it's interesting to look back on the infamous TouchWiz, having not looked at it for a number of years now. There have been some brilliant contenders for Samsung's best ever smartphone. The S3 was huge. The S7 Edge was my personal favourite, blending the best of old school and new school. The S9 and Note 9 go down as some of people's favourite phones of all time, let alone Samsung's, and the company has really earned its place as the king of Android. The Galaxy Note 4 will go down as one of the coolest phones to ever release, and perhaps Samsung's best ever smartphone. A device that was the last of its ilk, a phone that gave us all the functionality we ever wanted and did it in style. Maybe Samsung will give us something like this again. And you know what? The Galaxy S23 Ultra is maybe as close as it got since, but no matter how good phones get, I don't think any Galaxy will come close to the levels of the legendary Note 4.